Welcome to the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris. Happy to have you with us. Coming off the Super Bowl weekend. Now, for those, as I understand, that's from South Jersey, as well as from, of course, the city of brotherly love. You got to be going. Yay. Finally, it's been since 1960 since Philadelphia has won a championship in football. So, what does that mean? It simply means that the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions of the NFL. I guess it doesn't get any better than that. What a great game, by the way. And we will be talking more about the game this coming Wednesday, as you know, here on Youth Central Sports with Vince Carter Sr., that we do Youth Central Sports every Wednesday at 11 p.m. at youthcentralsports.com. And so we will be covering that, talking about that, and we're going to see if we can get James Harris on, former quarterback of the NFL, to come on, and also Ray Hamilton, who also played and coached in the NFL for over 25 years, to come on and give us their analysis and their outlook on what they saw. All right. And I had a prediction before the game. I'm going to play that doing Youth Central Sports on Wednesday, and you can hear my prediction of what I thought was going to happen. And, we all have our predictions. So, anyway, welcome to the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris. We've been around since 2013. Happy to be with you here on this Monday evening. Again, coming off Super Bowl weekend. And as you know, February is Black History Month. And there's nothing more than learning about history. There's plenty that we could talk about when it comes to history, our history, but history here in America, as you know, is not really taught. It's not taught well. It's not accurate. It's not true. And so many things that we've been taught since we were kids. I'm still trying to figure out, how can Columbus come and discover America? Can somebody please break that down for me? I don't understand how you come and discover something where somebody's already here. That's another show that we can talk about. But anyway, all of February on the Journey 2020, I'm going to try and highlight our history. Next week should have something really good for you. So you make sure that you tune in next week, because we're going to be talking about one of the first black doctors in Oviedo. Okay, yes, one of the first black doctors in Oviedo. A tremendous story, and you don't want to miss that. So that'll be next week here on the Journey 2020. A while back, Mary Gillum, a friend of mine who works with the Tuskegee Airmen, I had done some things with her and with the Tuskegee Airmen a while back. Well, I was blessed enough, and for those who, I don't know where you would live and you wouldn't know or don't know the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, shame on you. But I had a chance to interview quite a few of the original, let me say that again, the original Tuskegee Airmen. Now, what a privilege for me. How do you say thank you to those guys, right? And I don't have to tell you what they went through. I just recently had someone that I talked to who is a high-ranking officer in the military, who retired, who spent many years in the service and retired, very high ranking. What he said to me was, and he said, I would never admit to it, but who don't know that he said when he was in the military, he thought his middle name was the N-word. But that's nothing new to us. So what is the show about today here at the Journey 2020? I'm going to play back, even though I posted on YouTube from 2014, actually. So that was going on 4 years ago, that I sat down, interviewed quite a few of the Tuskegee Airmen. that was a privilege for me and an honor. So I wanted to share that with you tonight as a tribute to Black History Month, and how much of an honor that was for me, and something that I will always remember. Thanking Mary for giving me that opportunity, thanking them for actually sitting down and sharing some of their stories, that I got to ask some of my own questions that I wanted to ask myself. So with that being said, I'm just happy that I was able to have that time that they spent with me, and that I was able to record it, and it's posted, and hopefully it'll be on YouTube forever. But tonight I'm going to share those interviews with you as a tribute to them, Black History Month, as well as just the honor, just being able to sit and talk with those guys. And so here I am going to again share my time I spent with a few of the original Tuskegee Airmen. Enjoyed the interview.
I was drafted in 1942 and sent to Fort Ord, California. I was born in Los Angeles, and sat there for I guess 3 or 4 weeks, and they just kept adding people, GIs, into this big barracks we were in. And finally they said, hey, you guys are all going to go to Nashville, Tennessee. And what the heck? Why? Well, you're going to be classified there and take physicals and see if you qualified to fly airplanes, to be a pilot. I don't want to be a pilot, I want to be a machinist. That's what I love to do there in California, hopping up cars and that kind of stuff. And anyway, I passed the physical and everything, and all the tests. They were giving us tests all the time. Went down to Maxwell Field for pre-flight, and kept saying I wanted to be a machinist, and finally got rid of pre-flight and passed that. Went up to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and Tuscaloosa, they had primary, and they put me in a PT-17, and I went up and flew around for about an hour and came in and landed, and I said, to hell with being a machinist, I want to be a pilot. And from there I went to basics and then to advanced single engine, graduated from Napier Field, and after Napier we graduated 162 pilots, and out of the 162, 2 of us were retained there as instructor pilots. And then they sent us to, the 2 of us, to instructor school, and then I went back to Napier and worked with students there. And being the brand new instructor, they needed an instructor at Tuskegee, Alabama, and I said, where the heck is Tuskegee? And from there, as I was an instructor, I stayed there from 1944 to 1946, 44, 45, and 46. Well, I think one of the things was we flew a formation, and we were, when Lena Horne came down and visited Tuskegee, and we flew a formation and came over real low, and the other thing, which was the first thing, I was born and raised in California. My best buddy, he and I played football. He was a great big black guy, and I didn't realize he was black till I got to Tuskegee. And all of a sudden, things changed tremendously, and I got to the base there at one evening and showed him my orders and everything, and said, I want to go to the BOQ. Well, the BOQ, the guard there said, I can't let you on the base. And I said, why not? Here's my orders. I'm assigned here. And he says, but sir, it's after hours and you're white. So I could not get on the base. There's two things that struck me. I could come on the base, teach flying. I couldn't be in the officers club. I couldn't go to the PX. I could use the hospital if I had to.
It's a pleasure to be able to share the experience that we had and the value lessons out of it that is so meaningful for our young people as they face the future of our country. The training that we had, even though it was segregated at the time, was tops, and it allowed us to do a job that brought about a very important change, not only in the services, but to our country. That talent doesn't come by happenstance of birth, but by the opportunity to get an education and seek out the talents that you have, and that's so important for the future of our country.
One thing I remember very strongly, that all white men back during their days were not prejudiced, and that all Negroes were not as friendly as one would think they would be. I was the only Negro who became a Tuskegee Airman who did not volunteer. I was drafted. And when I was drafted, I spent 2.5 years in the Army Air Force. And during those 2.5 years in the Army Air Force, I was one of only 5 Tuskegee Airmen who was triple rated. I was a navigator, I was a bombardier, and I was a pilot. And when I resigned from the Air Force, the first thing I did was get my commercial pilot license. And two things, as I said, I always remember, not all white people were racist, and all Negroes were not what you think they were. I guess I'm different from everybody else, because I always figured that if you could drive a car, you should be able to fly an airplane. So it never dawned upon me. Flying an airplane, I don't know, I just took it for granted that I could always do it. But before I became a pilot, I was a navigator, and that was tough, because one of the hardest things in the Air Force was becoming a navigator. One of the easiest things in the Air Force was becoming a bombardier, and the next one was becoming a pilot. I know, because I was all 3 of them. The Air Force is a great place to be, as long as the people in it are what they're supposed to be. The reason why I was not too pleased with the Air Force, because I ran into a white lieutenant colonel who didn't like Negroes, and I topped his list. And during the course of my 2.5 years, he tried to have me court-martialed twice, he tried to have me sent overseas once, and he tried to have me thrown out of pilot training twice. So that's the reason why I wasn't too fit. That's the reason why when the opportunity presented itself, I was the quick first one to get out of the Air Force. The Tuskegee Airmen proved to the world one thing. If you got a good education and you work hard, the sky is the limit. That is my advice to you. I think we Tuskegee Airmen showed to the world that if we had those qualities, we could do the job just as well as anyone else. And I also believe that our experience and what we did during the World War II played an important role in President Harry Truman ordering the armed services desegregated in 1948. Although true desegregation didn't start taking place until 1965. And it took 4 days of intense rioting at Travis Air Force to start really bringing it about. Good education, hard work, you can succeed, with a little luck.
During 1942, I was a senior in high school, and the War Department sent a message to my high school saying that they are running short on people in electronics and radio repairmen. So the War Department started a school in Kentucky, and as a senior in high school, I had finished all my requirements, so I was selected to go to this high school. I selected to go to the school. School was in Lexington, Kentucky at a signal depot, and we spent about a year training to become radio mechanics, radio repairmen. And at the end of about a year, we had to take an exam, and those who made high scores, I was then put into active service. I was in October in 1942, and they sent me to Tuskegee, where I become part of the 302nd group. And at that time, they hadn't really formulated the 332nd, but they began to formulate the 332nd, and so I was placed in the 1000 Signal Company. And my training was turned over, that they were running short on people to take care of actually teletype machines. So I became a teletype mechanic, and I was actually in the 1000. We doing from there we went from the 332nd went to Detroit, and then from there to Oscoda, Michigan, and then we were in November, I think December of the end of 1940, we were sent over with the 332nd group. And from there, I went overseas in Italy, and I was there for 2 years. And my duties was to take care of all the teletype mechanics there and with the 332nd group. And I was at there until the end of the war. At the end of the war, then I think it was in 1945, I got out of the service, and then I went back to college, and I became a dentist. And then I went and practiced dentistry in Brooklyn, New York for actually about 40 years or so. And I really, when I got out of the service, I knew that being a member of the 332nd was something great, but I didn't really get the full impact of the importance of what we was doing, but I just knew it was something good. And it wasn't really until maybe, this was in 1945, but after I had finished school and practice, that the country began to recognize what we had done. And then later on, after I become part of the group, the Tuskegee Airmen, and this is what has evolved from that. I think that what we did, and particular the group that made a difference as far as what happened in the Army thereafter. I think that the experiences, the things, that the problems that we had was led to actually from having the whole Army integrated. I think we were pretty much involved in that because there were a lot of things that went down and was unjust. And I think that the President Truman at the time realized that, and it helped him to make that decision to integrate the whole services. That to me is a big factor. Plus, personally, it just helped me in general. It was a big factor in rounding out my whole career, and I think that made me a better person. The facts of what was done was pretty factual. However, to make it more interesting, some things were placed to make the story more complete. But the things that had happened, such as sinking of one of the ships and all like that, all of these things happened, and it happened pretty much while I was overseas with the group. So that was pretty accurate what went along.
Well, I finished high school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And during that time, that was 1941. There were no jobs anywhere for young or old people. So I said, I've got to find a job. And I volunteered, went and signed up for the Army.
Okay, for the Army.
Yeah, well, wasn't in the Air Force then, yeah. So, and I couldn't even go in the Army then because they didn't have a vacancy. They said, well, we'll give me your telephone and address and we'll call you when we get a slot for you.
Okay. Okay.
So about 2 months later, they called me. And I went to Belvoir, Virginia, Army Engineers. And there my career started in the Army, yeah. After the war, you know, it was that same year, that the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so there we were, you know. And we then as engineers had to go to Alaska on the Alaskan highway, or that highway from Canada into Alaska, because the United States had no way to supply Alaska, because the Japanese had the coastline with submarines.
Okay.
So we had to build a highway,
Oh, wow.
1,600 miles. Yeah, Dawson Creek, British Columbia, to across the tip of Canada into Alaska.
Okay.
Then, shall I go to the Air Force now or stay with the Army? Okay. Okay, I got discharged after the war.
Okay.
And I couldn't get a job anywhere. Permanent, just got a little work at the post office a little bit. So they said if you were discharged at a certain date, you had 90 days and you could get your old rank back.
Okay.
So I was discharged as a first sergeant, E7. So on the 89th day working at the post office, I decided I better make a move. And I joined the Air Force on the 89th day. So I had a career in the Air Force. Yeah. And I was at Columbus, Ohio, when Chappie James and that unit came up, the black unit from Tuskegee men from Gardman Field. They moved up to Lockburn at Columbus, Ohio, and that's when I became part of them, yeah. But I was not a pilot. I was administrative, first sergeant. Learning, I had many good jobs. I worked in finance, went to finance school. I was a first sergeant. I was worked in secret documents with the airspace engineers in Texas, and I had 5 years in NATO headquarters in Paris, international staff. That was very, very educational to me. My last 5 years at Lackland Air Force Base, I went in to work in the base post office, distribution of mail to the airmen, you know, or the whole base. It's a big training base. And there I spent 5 years because I started off working with an officer over me, and in the end, I was the chief running the whole system. So that was, to me, was a great experience. If I were to speak to the youth of the day, I'd say, by all means, stay out of gangs. Stay away from people that have no object in mind of going anywhere. You got to have a destination. You don't have a destination, you fall for anything. And most of these kids these days, they want to follow the crowd, and that's detrimental. They need to they need to get out and really enjoy life rather than be with people who are stagnant, not going anywhere, just want to have fun.
Well, I'm a little different from most of the airmen here. I went to college, Tuskegee, in 1940, and at the time they had a pilot training program for blacks in several of the black colleges. And I was at Tuskegee as a student, and also desired to learn to fly since they had the flying program there. So I got into the flying program in 1942 there at Tuskegee Institute, and proceeded to learn how to become a pilot. But at the same time, I got into the advanced ROTC unit because being in the ROTC and being in college sort of deferred you from the draft. At the time, this is World War II, which had started while I was there in college in 1941. And in the pilot training program, I was in that. At the time, I was also in the ROTC, which I enlisted in as a reservist. And unfortunately, in 1943, the reserves were called to active duty, so I went into the Army for my basic training and all other training. Eventually, I was accepted at the Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia, and became a second lieutenant. So really, I was sent overseas as an infantry lieutenant rather than being in the Army Air Corps at the time. So all of my wartime activities were that of an infantry officer. I was with the 92nd Buffalo Division in Italy. At the time, they were in the northern Apennine Mountain campaign, the Sergio Valley, and later on the Po Valley. By the time the war ended, we were in Genoa, Italy. So that sort of ended my affiliation with the Army activities really during World War II. One thing is, while over in Italy, we had an association with the 99th Pilot Squadron Officers Club, where we as infantry people had no activities of that sort. So we'd go to the club for drinks, food, relaxation, because in the Army as an infantry person, you're always moving. You don't have a chance to get established in a club for relaxation. So we were there down near Naples, Italy at that time. I think my other association was that I had a brother who was in the Tuskegee Airmen at Tuskegee, was the pilot, the bomber group. And at the time I was overseas, there was a horrific crash in Tuskegee during the night. stood under the storm and all, where the bomber crashed on his second attempt to land, and 8 of the 11 people on board were killed. And my brother at the time happened to have been the crew chief on the plane, and he was killed at the time, and I was not able to return to the United States for the funeral. Rather depressing for me at the time. Well, in a case like that, I would always say persevere. Sometimes you attempt to do things and you fail. You don't succeed. But that shouldn't deter you from attempting to achieve. And that shouldn't deter you from trying again. If you don't succeed, try it again. But don't let defeat be your enemy. And always try to shoot for the moon, I say. If you don't hit it, you get close to the stars, and that's better than nothing. But always shoot high, aim high, and try to do the best you can in whatever you do. And you can't go wrong if you do that. I would say that you have to have a determination that you don't want to be at the bottom of the scale. You want to improve on what you have seen in your surroundings, in your family, and their well-being. I'm the youngest of 6 people. Parents died when I was while I was 5 or younger. So you have to learn to depend on yourself and yourself only if you want to succeed. You can't depend on someone else to do things for you. You have to be independent and say, I'm going to do this. I have only me to be responsible for where I'm going and what I achieve.
Well, I'm from a family of 12, and there were 6 of us in the service at the same time. And my brother Samuel, who was one of the 66 pilots that were killed, and what can I say? I had been around Tuskegee Airmen from 1943 until today. I'm still involved with them. I was their secretary for 7-8 years, and then I went to first vice president, and then I had the honor of being the first female president of the organization from 98. Oh, well, you know, I really became a part of them and didn't realize how much they had done or what they went through, because I was in a situation where I was going through something myself, because I was Black and a nurse, and I was really making a new trail of Black women going in certain directions, and so I guess we intertwined, and we needed one to help us through. We were there for each other. And what we really tried to do was to do the very best that we could. We had to make a good showing, and it became a part of us to be number one. And I enjoyed being in that crowd of number one. We were shining each and every day. For a long time, when I speak to youngsters, I tell them that the sky is the limit. You can do anything you would like to do. Just make up your mind, set your goals, and go for it. It may take a little time, but you can do it. You can really do it because, as I said, the sky's the limit. Well, I'll tell you, we had great parents, and the schooling that we got from, the teaching that we got from our parents gave me the tools to go through life. We had a family rule at 6 o'clock. I don't care what you were doing, you belonged at the dinner table. And when we had dinner, my dad never, he was a very quiet man, but he would listen to everything that we said. It happened at school that day. Then when he got his turn, he would say, all right, now you said this and you said this. He had a good mind. He could remember everything that we said. And he would say, now, I will not stand for that. And he would tell us why, so that we were really, really schooled each and every day. And my dad expected nothing less from us. Because we were known in the town as the politest children in the town. My father would not stand for us to pass an adult without saying good morning, good afternoon. And it became a part of our everyday life. And you grow with that. It helps to build good character.
Yes.
And so that we knew right from wrong. There was no excuse. We were taught the right way and the wrong way. And you could choose whatever you wanted, but you didn't want to face my father, so you took the right way. I never really thought of it that way. I was really just going along with the tide. And you could feel that there was something that you were really proud of, but you didn't know why or how. But you had a tendency to follow these particular people who were really doing a good job. I have a problem with black and white. I never liked that. And like when I was in the service, I was more or less alone, and I would always think I was not a statistic. I was a part of the group. And this is the way I went along. I really didn't think about a black president or a white president. That didn't come into what I would think or was very important. So that when we did recognize that we had someone who could really, hey, he could do a good job, I'd like to vote for him. And we did. And it was a pleasure, really a pleasure, to be able to vote for Mr. Obama. I have a lot of respect for him. He's working hard and he has a lot of obstacles, but he has taken his time, and I'm very proud of him. Very proud.
Well, my dad went to Tuskegee when I was in high school, and that's all I heard all my life was Tuskegee. And growing up. So, well, I had a lot of jobs. I was flight engineer, crew chief, tail gunner, waist gunner.
Really?
And it was my 30 years. We have 30 years and 12 days. They wouldn't pay for the 12 days. I knew where it was, but I wrote an essay. What happened to my 12 days? You're discharged on the end of the month, no matter what date you enter the service. I retired in 73. Went in 43, came out in 73. When I got the Congressional Medal.
And what's the other one?
The other one? Commendation, Air Force Commendation. I received it twice. Oh, you don't want me to answer that one? I do, yeah? You don't want me to answer that one? I prefer no comment.
Okay, no comment. No.
Well, I enjoyed the movie. Well, it goes back to George Washington Carver came to Hungerford one time. I think I was in the 9th grade. And he gave his background as what he accomplished, how he went to Iowa State. He walked to Iowa State. And when he got there, he didn't have no money. And so he did the laundry for his teachers, cleaned the rooms, and cut grass and stuff. And so we asked him, how long did it take you to get your degree? And he said, I don't remember, but it took a lot of years. And what he said was striking to me. He said, you have 2 legs, and you have 2 hands, you have 2 eyes, you have a brain to use if you're wise. I never forgot that. But he gives what he had to do in order to get his degree. And it stuck with me all those years. I would say that anything is possible if you have the willpower to overcome any other obstacles in life. He can accomplish what he wants to. The sky's the limit. And my dad told me the same thing. When they broke up the outfit in '49, Colonel Davis said he was going to ship us to full Colonel World Air Force. That's everywhere. And I and about 8 of us ended on Okinawa, the 51st Fighter. And when the first promotion cycle, we all got promoted. And these Caucasians couldn't figure out how we got promoted so fast. We just got there. But see, we've gone years without promotions. 3 years, nobody got promoted. From 45 until, 49, 50, 1950.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, because you was part of the unit, there was a bonding there, wasn't it? It wasn't because of the...
Oh, yeah. Oh,
the
definitely.
bonding.
Definitely. Well, before we integrated, we were bonded. And that's when we integrated, because the 8 guys went for me, we stayed bonded too. Because we're Tuskegee Airmen. Colonel Davis was quite a person. He had a lot of impact on me too. He was the type that, he was in the summertime with the khaki uniform. At noontime, because when you sit on the desk, you get wrinkles here, so at noontime, he would go and change his pants, come back with a first pair of pants on, no wrinkles. Yeah. And if you're walking on that base, 3 walking together, 2 walked in front and step, and the 3rd one walked behind and step. If you're going to PX, the bar, wherever. Now, that base ran just like West Point.
And he brought West Point with him when he commanded us at Rock Run.
Well, okay, first of all now, I was not in the service. Tuskegee is my home, and as I call it, this was a part of my growing up period. So at first I worked as a part-time student over at the base in the PX and doing little odd things that a part-time student in high school would do to make a few bucks. Then when I graduated from high school, I got a job, applied and got a job down the base supply. That was where they kept all the aircraft parts and maintenance things for the planes. And I worked there until they closed in 1947. Working in base supply on the base, which was the Tuskegee Army Airfield Base Supply. And we supplied, like I say, the pilots with what they needed, some uniforms and things of that nature. And then mostly we stored and issued aircraft parts to keep the planes flying. Well, I guess one kind of was, I remember the band. The band would come around once a month, and they would always serenade us. And this was a major part of it, and we were just there doing our best to perform our duties. No one, I don't think, thought of history at this time. We were just there doing our job. We knew that this was an experiment and it was the first of the kind, so we were just a part of that. And the rules say that anybody associated with the program from 1941 through 1949 are considered an original Tuskegee Airman. So that's how I qualified to be a Tuskegee Airman.
I started out my aviation career when I was 14 years old in Harlem. I attended a high school that taught us aviation maintenance, mechanics. And by the time I graduated from that school, I was ready to take my exam. I became a licensed mechanic when I was 17. When I joined the Tuskegee Airmen, I was already a mechanic. They had no need to send me to school. I never went to a school in the Air Force because they knew that I was a licensed mechanic, and I also had about 10 hours of flying experience as a private pilot before I even went to Tuskegee. So I was almost a pilot before I went there. I was already a mechanic. They didn't even have to spend much time on training me. In fact, I was assigned to the 100th Fighter Squadron right off the bat, right after basic training. Basic training was like infantry training because the Air Force was part of the Army in those days. So I completed my training as an infantryman. I was assigned to the 100th Fighter Squadron as a mechanic, and I was working under a white mechanic, a supervisor type, so until I became familiar with the planes that they were flying in the 100th, which was the Curtiss P-40 fighter. So I left. I changed from being a civilian mechanic to an Air Force mechanic overnight when I was assigned down to Tuskegee, Alabama. And I remained with the 100th Fighter Squadron for about 6 months or so. And then I was transferred to one of the other squadrons, which was the 301st, 301, and I remained with the 301 until the war ended. I did it all on my own. I used to build, you know the model airplanes you see, the teenagers, that's how I started, building model airplanes while I was in Harlem and in school, in junior high school. I liked it so much I stuck with it. And when it came time to select a high school, I took a written exam. I passed the exam, and I was assigned to the technical high school called Harran Aviation High School, located on 99th Street on 3rd Avenue in New York City. It was a 3-year course, and when we were through, I met all the requirements for the Federal Aviation Administration to be issued a certificate. So I was a mechanic, a licensed mechanic, before I even met the Tuskegee Airmen before I even went to Alabama. And up until till this day, that was my career. In addition to that, I've gotten more experience as a civilian pilot. So I was a civilian pilot from the time I was 17 until now, but never a military pilot. And in the two fighter squadrons that I served, the 301st and the other one, I was a mechanic, crew chief. Well, in as much as I was a trained mechanic, naturally I followed that field. So when I had to go in the draft. You understand the time, all 18-year-olds had to register for the draft. And I didn't wait to be called. I went downtown New York City to sign up so I could go down. I knew about Tuskegee. And I wanted to go to Tuskegee to be a fighter pilot. That's what I wanted to do. But when they found out I was a trained mechanic, they said, there's nothing doing. They told me, we need mechanics, we don't need pilots. A mechanic had to get 6 months of training, so they saved money on me. I didn't have to go to mechanic school. And I remained with the 100 Fighter Squadron for quite a bit of time. I was happy with my lot because I was working in a career field which I chose while I was in junior high school. And I remained in aviation all the way up until now. Now, there was a break in service when the war ended. I couldn't get a job with the airlines right away. I worked for the post office for a little while, and then I finally got a job out at JFK Airport, and I've been in it ever since. And then I moved a step higher by joining the Federal Aviation Administration as an inspector, and I was an inspector up until just a few years ago. Aviation safety inspector with the FAA. Well, I thought that was great. I thought it was really great. And of course, a group of 10 or 15 of us, Tuskegee Airmen, were selected for the inaugural parade, and I was a member of the parade. I was in that parade when his first time around, the president's first time around. And then we were, for his second time around, I participated in that one too. So I thought it was great, no doubt about it.
Did you think you'd ever see that?
I thought so. I figured it was just a matter of time. Most of this time I've lived in Harlem and Brooklyn. I live in Maine now simply because my job transferred me to the state of Maine. I was an FAA inspector, and inspectors usually lasted about 7 or 8 years per station. Just it kept rotating us. That was a great job. So I've been in aviation. I've been in active aviation since I was 13 years old, when I started out in that high school in New York City. So I was successful as careers go. Really, got just what I wanted, but I had to work pretty hard at it. It's not easy learning that sort of thing from the beginning. The theory of aircraft manufacturing and flying, because I am a pilot. I'm still a pilot. I'm a civilian pilot. I was never military. In fact, I flew a seaplane just about 3 weeks ago up in Maine just for practice.
Welcome back, and I hope that you enjoyed the interview as much as I did spending time with them. Again, I want to thank Mary Gillen for allowing me and giving me that opportunity. I want to thank the Tuskegee Airmen for giving me their time, sharing their stories with just little old me. I mean, who would ever think that I would be sitting down talking to some of the original Tuskegee Airmen? And I love asking that question that I asked a few of them. How accurate was the movie to what really happened? So if you didn't hear what they have to say, I'm not going to say anything. You have to go back. If you're just tuning in and you just hearing that I was interviewing some of the original Tuskegee Airmen as a tribute to Black History Month, an interview that I did back in 2014, I want to share it here on the Journey 2020. But I asked them how accurate was the movie, And so the funny thing is that there was one in particular who really didn't too much care for the movie, but most of them did enjoy the movie. There was one in particular who was just he was just not feeling it though. But anyway, I would say it's a blessing again to have the honor to sit down and basically because I had dinner with them as where I had lunch with them, I broke bread with them, had a chance to sit and talk with them and hear their stories at the conference that was here in Orlando back in 2014. Thanks to Mary Gilliam, who allowed me to be able to be in a company and to interact and to videotape, because she helped set that whole thing up. So again, thank you, Ms. Gilliam, for allowing little old me to go hang out with the Tuskegee Airmen. This is a tribute as far as Black History Month here on the Journey 2020. And all of the stories that we have and our issues and problems, I'll share with you. For an example, I have a very good friend of mine who I was just talking with the other day. And his daughter had an accident. And, well, no, that's something separate. The daughter had an accident, but the other daughter, car broke down, and evidently they have to replace the transmission. Well, when he said what he said, well, I had to take it over here where it's costing me $3,000 to have the car fixed. And so I said to him, I said, well, why didn't you take it to Mike, who is my mechanic, who has his own shop, who can easily replace any transmission in any car of any kind, and would save him probably about $1,500 in doing so. And what he said to me was, I didn't even think about it. So as a person of color, I'm hearing a man who is old as he is, understanding, and I'm going, I don't know what you say to somebody who is old as he is, and which is what our problem is. He goes, I didn't even think about it. That's our problem. That's our problem. I don't know what do you say to somebody as old as he is, and his comment was, I didn't think about it. Again, that's our problem. And it's very sad. His comment is, I didn't think about it. We're not talking about a shade tree mechanic. We're not talking about somebody that's not professional. We're not talking about somebody that won't do a great job. As a matter of fact, the person that he should have thought of would do a better job. And what I mean by that is the type of work that he does, he's not only going to check the transmission, he's going to go out through the car and make sure everything's working okay. And if there's something little and minor, he's going to go ahead and fix that and do it. And he probably won't even tell you about it, because that's the type of person he is. And he'll say, oh, by the way, this thing was a little low, or this right here, I found this over here, and I just went on ahead and just fixed it. I did this to it. Because that's the kind of guy he is. But what do you say to my friend, who I love dearly, who is spending $3,000, and it's not even that he may or may not have the money. It's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about understanding how we empower ourselves and how we just do what we do to hurt ourselves. And his comment was, I didn't even think about it. After that, I didn't even want to talk about it. It's too frustrating. And if he was 21, 22 years old, but he is old as coffee, just like me, what do you say when all we do is hurt ourselves for something as so simple as, I didn't even think about it? But you rather go give your $3,000 that's not even in your circle. That's our problem. Anyway, again, it just frustrates me because there's something wrong with us. There's something wrong with us. There's something wrong. But anyway, I'm Charles Morris. I hope you enjoyed the Journey 2020 here with the Tuskegee Airmen. Tune in next week, where we're going to have a very informative show, where we'll be having some information on one of the first black doctors in Oviedo and that struggle and what it went through and all the history of that. Something that there's nothing new under the sun, but it's still a great story. Thank you for taking the time out here on your Monday at www.thejourney2020.com. Blessings to you. Enjoy the rest of your week. Get out, do something in reference to Black History Month. Educate yourself, share a story. Let us hear from you. I'm Charles Morris. Enjoy the rest of your week.